Mesopotamia, southern Iraq. Tradition has it that this was the Garden of Eden. Tomorrow, it could be paradise lost. Orangutans in Indonesia's forests, their survival hangs in the balance. A nature reserve in Germany. Not long ago, storks were stilting among grazing cattle, larks were singing, and frogs were jumping. This is a story of unique landscapes, rare species, and of humans living in harmony with nature. Today they're all endangered, not by climate change, but by alleged climate conservation. It's a journey to the dubious sources of so-called green energy. What's happening in the name of climate conservation and green economy is really a rampage against the natural world, a slap in the face of ecological reason. Cancun, Mexico, a holiday hotspot. But in the winter of 2010, many visitors are not here for the beaches. They've come for the UN Climate Change Convention. Thousands of delegates are debating one of the most pressing issues of our day, climate conservation. What's at stake is the future of our suffocating planet. One of them is ULRICH EICHELMANN. For years, he's been working for the protection of nature and endangered species. Together with environmental organizations, he's been pushing for action to stop global warming. But lately, he can't help thinking that there's something going wrong with climate conservation. So he came to get a personal view.
Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished.
Under the auspices of the United Nations, politicians, scientists, corporate representatives, and NGOs negotiate our planet's destiny. In spite of many differences, there's one shared idea.
We're selling a river over here. We have islands over here. Buying time.
To stop global warming, renewable energies should be massively promoted. Future energies should be clean, sustainable, and green. They should drive a global change towards a green economy.
Come and make the right choice for a green, clean future, not a future of environmental destruction, of climate devastation. That's the choice in front of you.
Sounds reasonable, but is it really? If we continue on this apparently green path, where will it lead us? Hydropower is one of the pillars of the propagated change. Some 50,000 big hydroelectric dams already exist across the globe. The damage they cause to nature and humans has drawn a lot of protest, so that during the 90s, only few additional dams were built. But now, dam proliferation is booming.
I think that climate change is helping the hydropower energy because it's a clean source of energy and the technology is well known.
Brazil is represented too. The country is a leader in promoting hydropower.
So there's still a very big potential in the country, which is located in the Amazon. And the other thing we came here for is to show that the electricity sector is not destroying the Amazon. We have some plants there, and the plants that have been already made and the plants planned are going to take only less than 1% of the whole Amazon.
Brazil is planning to dam up its rivers in the Amazon basin. The government's promotion videos give the impression that these power stations are in harmony with nature and climate conservation and are no threat to wildlife and natural vegetation. But is that so? The Amazon rainforest, the planet's vastest natural forest, drained by the planet's vastest network of rivers. This is the world's green lung. its biodiversity is without par. The Amazon boasts more than half of all the planet's plant and animal species. Woodland and rivers have always sustained the local people, including the 2 million inhabitants of Manaus on the Rio Negro. Day by day, enormous amounts of fish are processed and sold, and consumers can choose from a wide range of species. This bounty is the gift of a nearly intact natural environment. Most of the Amazon's tributaries can be called intact. Take the Xingu, 900 kilometers downstream from Manaus. In the rainy season, this river's flow is greater than that of the Mississippi. All of Europe's rivers combined do not have as many species of fish. One unique feature is the Volta Grande, a 100-kilometer loop in the river's course with thousands of islands and cataracts. This is one of the Amazon's great natural wonders. And it's also where the world's third largest dam is projected, the Belo Monte Dam. It requires the Xingu's course to be diverted to fill a reservoir as big as Lake Constance. The Volta Grande would practically fall dry. The consequences for humans and wildlife would be disastrous. Some 100 fish species would be threatened with extinction. More than 20,000 people would have to be dislocated, including the Xikrin Kayapo tribesmen whose livelihood depends on the river. One of them describes their situation. I am Arikafu, he says. This is my family. We are indigenous, born and raised here. The Indios don't want the dam, he says. It will destroy all they have. Plants, fish, the river, the forest, their medical herbs, everything, even their homes. Many things would happen to the Indios' disadvantage. We want to live in nature, he says, as it is now, forever. If the dam is built, there will be a conflict and a war. All the neighbors and relatives will get together. Many villages and tribes will oppose this.
Other bits of the river so that they can have enough.
The Indios have already stopped a dam project on the Xingu twice. Their protest during a promotional event of the powerful Electrobras Corporation hit the news. They attacked the company's spokesman. He got away with a shock.
Say what you're saying is lies. None of this is important. We don't want dams, and that's what you've got to understand. She was still ranting away, and the press, they just went mad and started lunging forward. There was a confusion of knives and sticks and cameras, and in that whole confusion, the man from the industry company fell off his chair backwards, and then for somewhere down the line, he got cut by one of the knives.
Even back then, the Indios, in their opposition against the destruction, were supported by Austrian-born Bishop Erwin Kreutler, and he's still supporting them. For his engagement, he was awarded the Alternative Nobel Prize in 2011. How can we drive these people into desperation, the bishop wonders, and just say, get out of here? Whatever compensation they're promised, they'll never get it. In 2010, the indigenous tribes of the region spoke up once again. They're afraid of the dam projects and the accompanying exploitation of the forest. If they lose the river and the forest, they lose their livelihood. Is this the price for climate conservation and a green economy?
Das ist eben genau das Gegenteil. Das Xingu geht ja zugrunde.
According to Bishop Kreutler, it's the very opposite. The Xingu River will die. Nothing will be saved, a lot destroyed. He can see no logic in building dams for climate conservation when thousands of square kilometers of tropical rainforest are destroyed with an impact on the climate.
Tropischer Regenwald werden zerstört werden. Und das hat doch einen Einfluss auf das Klima.
Bishop Kreutler knows what he is talking about. A few decades ago, the Balbina power station was built near Manaus to produce clean electricity. Sounds perfect, but the reality is this. $230,000 hectares of primeval forest have been flooded. Millions of trees are now rotting in the reservoir. A depressing sight. But what you don't see is even worse. Underwater, methane is produced, which is more damaging to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. Balbina is like a gigantic exhaust, producing 20 times more climate damage than a coal-fueled power station with the same electricity output. Back at the Cancun Climate Conference, Brazil's government is showing off the country's impressive biodiversity. Climate change is threatening this, they say. So renewable energies should be promoted. One example they are quoting is the giant South American turtle, a species to which the Xingu is of special relevance. It's September, the dry season. The islands are breeding grounds of black skimmers and various terns. At dusk, this is the stage of a unique natural spectacle. Female river turtles are waiting for their cue. At nightfall, the beaches come alive. One after another, the turtles leave the water. These islands represent one of the major turtle nesting sites on the planet. Some 30,000 females come here to lay their eggs in the sand. As soon as one group is done, the next one moves up. On some islands, there are so many that the turtles are still laying eggs at dawn. In a single season, 1.8 million eggs are buried in the sand. Black vultures are hoping to harvest some of them. But it's not the vultures that pose a threat to these turtles. The threat is hydropower, even though the islands are way below the projected dam. The Belo Monte Dam will hold back the sand, so the islands will no longer be replenished. They will disappear, and with them, turtles and birds. Belo Monte is just the beginning. There are plans for power projects on almost every river of the Amazon basin, more than 60 megadams and hundreds of medium-sized ones. Janssen Suenon, one of Brazil's leading fish experts, warns against the consequences for biodiversity.
If all these dams will be constructed, we will lose maybe 1,000 species of fish in the world region.
1,000 species. That's 10% of the entire planet's freshwater fish species.
So it's a very large loss of biodiversity. There is no turning back in this way. If you lose This species will last forever.
The electricity produced here will be of little use to the local people. It will serve industries, especially aluminium production. These factories destroy the rainforest and speed up global warming. Hydropower kicks off a vicious circle. If these dams are built, the biodiversity of the planet's green lung is history. The killer is climate conservation.
Da gibt's keine Amazonien mehr.
The Amazon will be gone, the bishop says. Even now, much of the Amazon rainforest has been cleared. Bishop Kreutler came here in 1965. Since then, he has seen vast areas irredeemably destroyed. He thinks that these dams will be the final blow. After that, all we can do is sing a requiem for the Amazon.
Da können wir nur noch das Requiem singen.
What the Amazon is to the planet's nature, Mesopotamia is to mankind's cultural heritage. The land between Euphrates and Tigris is seen as the cradle of Western civilization. No other region is as closely connected with our cultural history. Our journey through Mesopotamia starts in southeastern Turkey, in the upper Tigris Valley. The Tigris meanders through a breathtaking scenery with impenetrable canyons and traditionally farmed steppes. In spring, the plains turn into an ocean of flowers. This is where ancient tradition and modern progress clash. The jewel of the Upper Tigris is flanked by steep cliffs. The city of Hasankeyf. Hasankeyf's foundations were laid millennia ago. In the course of time, the people have dug some 6,000 caves into the cliffs. Many were inhabited until the 1970s. Life here is simple, but the people are proud of their city. They make a living from agriculture, fishing, and tourism. Hasankeyf is known to almost every child in Turkey. Each year, some 100,000 visitors come to admire the ancient town. But now, after all these millennia, the days of Hasankeyf are counted. It survived the onslaughts of Mongols, Artakides, and Romans, but it may not survive modern climate conservation. Hasankeyf is to be drowned in the projected Ilisu Reservoir. The Ilisu power station is one of the world's most controversial power projects.
Wahnsinn. Schau dir das an. So sehen Großprojekte aus.
When ULRICH EICHELMANN visits the construction site 70 kilometers downstream from Hasankeyf, he's both overwhelmed and appalled. It's the Old Testament's Paradise River, he remarks. But now, this is hell. A few years ago, ULRICH says, he visited Ilisu village on the Tigris River. Now he's back taking a tour with the Turkish contractor. With considerable pride, the contractor shows ULRICH the gigantic conduits which will divert the river.
And when the Tigris comes, it's like, you better not be here.
Of course, nobody will be here.
Along the Tigris River, not a stone will remain unturned. A dam 135 meters high and 2 kilometers long will set the entire valley underwater. On this former shepherd's trail, heavy trucks are rolling. The gentle hills with their poppy fields have been blasted away. 100 villages will be inundated. 65,000 people will lose their homes.
Und dass das auch noch mit dem Staudamm.
The real mockery, ULRICH says, is that all this is labeled as climate conservation. People are driven away. Vast natural spaces are being destroyed. Hasankeyf and Mesopotamia are the cradle of our civilization. The very source of our culture is being destroyed by a modern non-culture, a reckless belief in technology. ULRICH calls it madness, a climate crime.
Zerstört. Das ist einfach Wahnsinn und das ist Climate Crimes.
Around Hasankeyf, too, construction work has already begun. The top of the minaret marks the intended water level. Everything below that, houses, gardens, caves, cemeteries, and the 900-year-old pylons of the bridge, will be submerged. Not until they reach an ancient balcony above the caves, says ULRICH, do they begin to grasp the gigantic dimensions of that reservoir. For millennia, he marvels, countless generations have been impressed by this panoramic view.
Actually, the day is starting when they are starting with the prayer at 5 o'clock.
ULRICH fears that he and his companions will be the last ones to enjoy this view. If the Turkish government has its way, they'll soon get their feet wet up here. But opposition is lively. For years, the inhabitants of the valley, together with national and international organizations, have been fighting against the threat of this project. They've been joined by numerous artists such as pop singer Tarkan and Orhan Pamuk, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. The singer Aynur expresses her disapproval in a song, and the famous filmmaker Fatih Akin made a video clip of it. Osman Baydemir, the mayor of neighboring Diyarbakir, a city of 2 million, wraps it up.
Ama bana göre Ilısu barajını inşa eden
In my opinion, the policy behind building the Ilisu Dam is criminal, comparable to attempted murder.
insan öldürmeye tam teşebbüs suçunu işlemektedirler. Eğer baraj
Once the reservoir is filled, he says, Hasankeyf will be underwater.
Hasankeyf boğulacaktır. Dolayısıyla hükümet
The government will have killed more than one person, and the architects of this plan will feel like murderers after the commitment of their deed.
Bana göre bir insanı öldüren kişinin yaşamış olduğu ruh hali neyse o ruh halini yaşamalıdır.
But the Turkish government wants even more. It is planning a total of 1,500 dams across the country. After that, not a single free-flowing river will remain. The Turkish government sells this as a contribution to climate conservation.
Baraj her ne kadar inşa edilmeye başlandıysa da
Even though the dam is already under construction, we need to raise our voices until the last minute and continue our campaign to stop it.
sürdürmeye devam edeceğiz.
That's also the hope 1,000 kilometers downriver from Hasankeyf, along the Tigris in southern Iraq. Because the dam's impact would not be limited to Turkey, but affect a very special region in the neighboring country. Near the city of Basra, the Tigris unites with the Euphrates River and forms the Shat al-Arab, the river of the Arabs. Before they unite, the rivers jointly inundate a vast plain, forming the Mesopotamian marshes. Here, some 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians developed writing, the first legal system, and the basic methods of agriculture. Legend has it that this was the Garden of Eden, a paradise. Today's inhabitants are the descendants of the Sumerians, the marsh Arabs. Like their ancestors, they build their houses of reeds on tiny islands. The swamps offer everything they need. A family's most valuable possession are their water buffalo. Some 200,000 roam freely in the channels and reed beds. There cannot be a more natural way of keeping cattle. They can swim long distances. Cattle egrets use them as ferries, sometimes without express permission. When evening falls, the buffalo return home to be fed and milked. Until the 1990s, the marshes were mostly still intact. Each spring, the two rivers swamped an area the size of Belgium. But as a revenge for the marsh Arabs' opposition against Saddam Hussein during the First Gulf War, the dictator ordered the marshes to be dried out by huge dikes. The region became a desert, and the people had to migrate. This went on until 2003. After Saddam's capture, Iraq experienced its greatest success story: the return of the water. The people tore holes into the dams, and the water could flow where it always had. Now the reeds are growing again, and more people are returning. They're rebuilding their huts, raising cattle, and resuming their traditional way of life. Even the motifs, magnificent structures made of reeds, have been rebuilt. This is where the sheiks meet to discuss public issues. Wildlife, too, has returned. Egrets, cormorants, terns, bee-eaters, and kingfishers are all back. Millions of migrant birds use the swamps to rest during their journeys from Asia to Africa and back. It's paradise regained, in Iraq of all places. But it could be lost again, this time probably forever. Life on the Tigris depends on water and on Turkey's hydro dam policy. If the Aliso Dam and other projected dams will be built, the marshes are likely to turn into desert again. The dams would hold back the vital flow of water. While Hassan Kayef on the upper reaches would drown, this region would dry up, due to green energy. One person who has struggled for years to save the marshes is Azam Awash, president of Nature Iraq. He wants more areas to be swamped, but that requires more water from the Tigris.
This is a Sumerian brick. I am in the middle of the marshes of Mesopotamia. Until the 1990s, this was a water world, an Eden, if you will. Reed beds, wherever you look. Birds in the sky migrating. Buffalo frolicking. People living one with the environment. Look at it now. It is a desert. Why is it a desert? Because water is being held upstream by dams. We have since been able to restore some of the marshes, But if Eliso Dam gets built, not only will this area continue to become a desert, the restored areas will become a desert. Dams have devastating effects downstream. Hydroelectric power is not green. Dams cause deserts.
At this time, we can still see a unique, almost forgotten world here in Mesopotamia, with people living as they have been for many generations. This is truly a Garden of Eden. And yet it seems that we are poised to eradicate the roots of our civilization in the name of progress and climate conservation. Such eco-crimes are not restricted to countries like Brazil or Turkey. They also happen in the very heart of Europe. Germany is a worldwide leader in eco-friendly electricity. 20% of Germany's electricity comes from renewable sources. In the fields of wind and solar energy, Germany takes an international lead. But in the shadow of these highly visible energy plants, another branch has been growing, almost unnoticed, but very profitable. The raw material is grown in fields, corn. All across Germany, these domes are popping up like mushrooms. Biogas plants that turn corn into energy. This is the Korin-Schorfheide Biosphere Reserve north of Berlin, a sprawling natural reserve and popular recreation area just outside Germany's capital. In the Korin Reserve, one can meet animals that have long disappeared elsewhere. Cranes, for instance, searching for food on the pastures. Around pools and in boggy meadows, lapwings are nesting and white storks find nourishment. With some luck, one may even see Germany's rarest eagle, the lesser spotted eagle. Complex protection programs are in place to help them survive. But the idyllic image belies reality. It's not new motorways or land drainage that threaten the eagle, but biogas. Corn, to be precise. Rows and rows of corn to the horizon and right up to the waterfront. Martin Flade of Brandenburg's Ministry of the Environment is in charge of the large protected areas.
Viele Arten der Feldflur, die in Getreidefeldern und so weiter vorkommen.
Martin says many species inhabiting agricultural areas like wheat fields cannot survive or reproduce where corn is planted.
Im Mai erst gepflügt, also erst abgespritzt mit Roundup, oft dann gepflügt und
cornfields are not plowed and planted until May, after treatment with pesticides. So any species inhabiting these areas in April and May cannot breed here because their nests are destroyed. This affects ground-breeding birds like larks and lapwings, but also brown hares and amphibians.
betrifft auch Feldhasen zum Beispiel oder auch Amphibien, die dann vielleicht in diese Bodenbearbeitung reingeraten. Und wenn Sie diese Flächen jetzt mal sehen, die hier hinter uns sind.
Look behind us. We've got 1,000 hectares of corn here, sometimes with corn for 4 years in a row. Ecologically, this is a desert. In the heart of the reserve, stork nests are deserted. Populations of lapwings, larks, and hares are dropping dramatically. Because of green energy, the lesser spotted eagle, too, appears to have no future in Germany. Corn is closing in on its hunting grounds. Eagles cannot feed their brood with corn. This situation is now found all over Germany. The biogas boom is rife across the entire country. At the end of 2011, there were 7,000 biogas plants. 3 more are being completed every day. In recent years, the annual increase in cornfields has been 200,000 hectares, taken away from nature. The winner is agriculture. Farmers have gained a new source of income, but the calculation is not that simple. This is Schleswig-Holstein, in the very north of Germany. The stork village of Bergenhusen is surrounded by vast wetlands. This is traditional dairy land. Renate Rahn from the nearby Meggendorf runs a farm. For generations, her family has raised cattle.
Und früher war das so, dass jeder Landwirt so 10 bis 15 Hektar Acker pachten konnte.
In the past, she explains, each farmer was able to lease 10 to 15 hectares because no one owns enough land. There used to be 60 farming families, mostly working rented fields. But now the producers of biogas offer twice the price per hectare, and the dairy farmers cannot afford that. So now the cows are fed with grass, silage, and a little corn and soybeans, which have to be bought. The cows have been bred to produce more and more milk, so they need nourishment that's rich in energy. Otherwise, the cows won't produce. If we have a biogas plant here, Renate says, and we have to buy soybeans, rainforest is being cleared elsewhere to plant the soybeans we import to feed our cows. For the dairy farmers, biogas means competition. But is biogas at least good for the country's climate balance? This is Germany's biggest biogas plant and one of the biggest worldwide, Klarsee, near the East German town of Penkun, a 45 minutes drive from the Korin-Schorfheide Nature Reserve. The plant's 20 megawatt output supplies 50,000 households with electricity. That's impressive. Even more impressive is the plant's appetite. Day after day, it devours 1,000 tons of corn. For a year's supply, 10 to 12,000 hectares of corn are needed. This is inefficient, as the comparison with wind energy demonstrates. For the same electricity output, a wind park requires only 400 hectares, just 4% of the land surface required for biogas. Biogas plants are land eaters. No other form of energy generation needs so much land for such a poor energy output. In the final analysis, the output is even less. If you deduct the energy used for the production of fertilizer and pesticides, for plowing and harvesting, the bottom line is nearly zero. If the climate balance also takes into account the emissions created by plowing green fields, the overall result is negative. Biogas damages the planet's climate. As early as 2007, the Agricultural Council of Germany's Ministry of Agriculture issued a very poignant report warning against the negative impact of this kind of bioenergy. It will increase CO2 and nitric oxide emissions with the result that the expansion of biogas production may be counterproductive for climate conservation. In the light of Germany's climate conservation politics, these findings do not recommend the promotion of bioenergy production on agricultural land. And yet German politicians opted for it. In 2012, they extended their subsidies program for biogas production. Because of this, landowners earn considerably more by planting corn than by producing food or leaving wetlands in a natural state. Electricity consumers pay the bill, believing they are contributing positively to climate conservation. Our road traffic literally stinks. Our mobility is one of the main causes of global warming. Cars, trucks, airplanes, and ships produce 25% of our global CO2 output. That's why politicians sell biofuel as an alternative to fossil fuels. In the European Union, by 2020, at least 10% of the fuel we fill into our tanks should be plant products. Applied climate conservation without changing our mobility habits. The apparent ease of this is tempting. This is the Indonesian part of Kalimantan Island, which is known as Borneo. Borneo boasts one of the planet's vastest and most beautiful rainforest regions. The biodiversity is breathtaking. This is the home of the orangutan. These primates live only here and on neighboring Sumatra. Orangs spend their entire lives in the jungle, if we let them. But we don't. Their home range is being cleared fast and faster. In spite of international protests, 2 million hectares of rainforest are destroyed every year in Indonesia, a shameful world record. The substance that erodes the jungle is palm oil. Palm oil is used in food and cosmetic products, but in recent years, Europe's, India's, and China's thirst for biodiesel, the booming green fuel market, has been driving the sprawl of palm plantations. As a result, the orangs are not only robbed of their habitat, the plantations pose another danger. The owners regard them as pests and persecute them because they damage the young seedlings. While conservationists struggle to save as many animals as possible, hundreds of orangs are killed on the plantations each year. The orangs become collateral damage of the fuel market, victims of climate conservation. And in Indonesia, climate conservation is a big word. Neste, the world's leading producer of biodiesel, has just opened another refinery in Rotterdam. Maxime Verhagen, Minister of Economy of the Netherlands, praised Neste's investment. This refinery represents a huge investment in our economy and provides a boost to sustainable growth. It will help the Netherlands realize its ambitions as a leader of the bio-based economy and a major biomass hub in Europe. For the orangutans, this does not bode well. Today's total palm oil plantation area in Indonesia is already 7 million hectares. By 2020, this area will expand to 20 million hectares. In spite of all these drawbacks, biodiesel does nothing to relieve our pressure on the climate. On the contrary, because forests are burned, CO2 is emitted. What's worse, in Borneo, most forests grow on peaty soils. When they're drained, these soils emit all the carbon they have accumulated over millennia. This is why Indonesia is the world's #3 climate rogue, behind the USA and China. Nowhere are the excesses of climate conservation as blatant as in Borneo. The biodiesel boom has led to the destruction of vast rainforests, precisely those rainforests on which our planet's climate depends. Tens of thousands of animal and plant species are being pushed to the brink of extinction. Among them, one of our closest relatives, the orangutan. In Cancun, the world is seen in a different light. Here, the praise is being sung to renewable energies. No one mentions the negative impact. It's frustrating that our approach to climate conservation is possibly destroying more species than climate change, and no one seems to notice. We may be the last generation that has seen all these unique landscapes in reality. It's a sickening thought. How stupid are we to allow this to happen and even stick a green label on it? In Cancun, one thing became obvious. In big politics, ecology and nature are of no relevance. Everything is driven by economics. So ULRICH returns to Europe in order to discuss his experiences and queries with economists. The first expert and interview partner is the German economist Nico Pech. ULRICH shows him images from his journeys. Nico Pech has a reputation as a leader in alternative economic thinking.
Der momentan praktizierte Klimaschutz.
The economist thinks that climate conservation as presently practiced throws out the baby with the bathwater. It does not reduce emissions, nor is it compatible with our goals for biodiversity and nature protection, goals which are equally as important as reducing CO2 emissions. ULRICH is surprised. He's never heard such poignant words from either politicians or conservationists.
Das wirkliche Problem moderner Konsum- und Industriegesellschaften ist das Wirtschaftswachstum.
The real problem of our modern consumer and industrial society, Pech says, is economic growth which can never be neutralized in ecological terms, despite technological innovations. Almost simultaneously, Tim Jackson, one of Britain's most renowned economists, presents his thoughts on a sustainable economic system in Hamburg, Germany. He, too, regards relentless economic growth as the root of the problem.
As parents, we like to see our children grow, so many people use that analogy and say, well, what's wrong with growth? It's a good thing, isn't it? We like things to grow. Trees grow, plants grow, children grow. But actually, they do up to a point, and then they stop. And as a parent, you know that very well, that you don't want your children to go on growing. It makes no sense. There is no model in nature of things that continually grow and grow and grow, and yet this is the model that we've taken as the basis for the economy. So it's a slightly perverse model, and it's perverse in all sorts of ways. First, that it makes no sense to be growing and growing when you're living in a finite place.
Wenn wir so weitermachen wie bisher, wird es 2000.
If we continue in our ways, Nico Pech says, there will be no more natural spaces by 2020 or 2030 because we have eradicated them in the name of green growth.
Grünen Wachstums wahrscheinlich eingeebnet haben.
Having the same impression, ULRICH asks, what can we do to avoid at least the worst?
The basis for the exploration, I think, is to establish where the ecological limits lie. And we haven't done a very good job of that, except perhaps in relation to climate, but in relation to habitats, in relation to biodiversity, in relation to scarce resources, in relation to water. We run our economies as if they don't matter. We run our economies as if they're not the basis of the supply chain for every industry that we have. And it's nonsense to do that. So establish the limits is the first thing.
Das Erste, was der Staat jetzt machen müsste,
The first thing the state should do, Nico Pech says, is pronounce a moratorium. We must not place energy plants into those parts of the land that are still unused, where the soil is unsealed. The most important thing we need to do, he says, is reduce our expectations in terms of material self-realization, including consumerism, mobility, telecommunication. The second priority is reduction. The third priority is reduction. And then we need to think about carefully redesigning our remaining industrial supply systems. That means local economy, regional economy, even home production.
Industriellen Versorgungssysteme nachdenken. Das heißt über Lokalökonomie, Regionalökonomie, mehr selber machen, also Selbstversorgung sogar.
For the first time, ULRICH gets the impression that someone can see what the problem really is and offers more than the usual hollow phrases about more energy efficiency in cars or fridges. The root of the problem is our lifestyle and consumerism. The future of the planet is in our hands. But what future? How many natural spaces do we want to preserve? Or, in other words, how much nature do we not want to destroy? In another generation, should we still have the Amazon, Mesopotamia, wild orangutans, lesser spotted eagles, Amazon river dolphins, and Kayapo Indios and marsh Arabs? If we want that, we need to set limits to the destruction of nature. A global master plan for natural spaces without economic development. This won't happen without rigorous changes in our economy and society. We need to turn our backs on perpetual growth. Admittedly, many of us find this difficult to imagine. Let's begin to face the facts. Climate conservation is often a smokescreen of eco-criminals and profiteers. They pretend to protect the climate, but all they do is destroy our natural world. It's not too late for decisive changes. We just need to take the right steps. Nature has great power. It's tough. Wherever nature is given space, it will fill it. Just like in Iraq, where the life returned to the desert once the water came back.